Boots struck hard against the warped boards of the main street, the sound sharp as gunmetal in the still air. Dust swirled with each step, curling like smoke around the hem of her dress. The widow kept her head bowed, shawl pulled tight, the cloth clutched her shoulder as though it alone kept her bones together. Men outside the saloon leaned in their chairs, hats tipped low, cards half forgotten in their hands. Their laughter cut through the heat like broken glass. One spat tobacco into the dirt and muttered, "There goes the fallen one," loud enough for all to hear. Another added, "Ain't clean, not her," and the rest chuckled, dry and hollow. She didn't stop, didn't look at them. Only the faintest tremor moved through her shoulders as she passed beneath the swinging doors where piano keys stumbled through a tired tune. From the porch of the general store, an old woman shook her head, whispering into her apron. A boy with bare feet stared wide-eyed until his mother yanked him back inside. Even the sheriff, perched on a bench in front of his office, pretended sleep beneath his hat brim, though his jaw twitched with every jeer. The widow reached the well at the center of town. Her hand, thin, veined, raw from work, turned the handle slow, iron groaning with the effort. A bucket descended, chains clinking like distant spurs. When it rose again, she steadied it with care, though her grip shook. She poured water into a tin cup, but her lips never touched it. Instead, she whispered, soft, so soft it carried no further than the rim of the bucket. "I'm not pure." The words broke like glass dropped in silence. A ranch hand passing with a sack of grain stopped dead, head tilting as though he'd her ghost. He blinked, uncertain, before hurrying on, boot heels scuffing faster against the dust. Wind picked up, rattling shutters, tugging at the cloth around her shoulders. She caught it tight again, eyes darting left, right, as if the whole town might see through it. For a heartbeat, her veil slipped, and the pale mark of an old scar glimmered along her collarbone. Gasps murmured from a pair of women across the street. They turned, whispering furiously, skirts rustling like dry leaves. The widow adjusted the cloth, her fingers white with strain, and walked on. The sun bore down heavy, burning the boards of porches, setting every window to glare like mirrors. Heat shimmered above the roofs, making the air itself seem to writhe. From the shadows of the blacksmith's awning, a figure watched her pass. No jeer, no word, only eyes that followed steady, unreadable. His hand rested on the worn leather strap of his saddlebag, his frame still as carved stone. The widow's steps carried her down the road, past doors that would not open, past faces that turned away. Dust lifted behind her, catching the light, and hung there long after she was gone, like the whisper itself, too soft to fade, too heavy to forget. The saloon doors slapped open, wood cracking against the frame, and every head turned at once. A man stepped in slow, the kind of slow that carried weight. Dust clung to his boots, streaked his coat, and the scar across his cheek told more than his silence ever would. He moved past the smoke, past the stink of whiskey and sweat, until the room swallowed him whole. Cards slapped the table, coins clinked sharp, but eyes kept stealing toward him. The piano faltered, then stuttered back to life, thin and brittle as glass. He didn't speak, just set his hat on the bar and raised two fingers. The barkeep poured without a word, hands careful not to spill. The stranger lifted the glass, studied the amber, and drank as if the fire inside was the only warmth left to him. Outside, a shout cut through the heat. There she is again, hiding that rag like it makes her holy. Laughter followed, cruel and jagged. The widow's figure drifted along the street, her cloth pulled tight, steps quickening under the bite of every word. Through the smoke-stained window, the stranger's gaze fixed on her. The laughter outside grew louder. Boots scraped against the boards as men gathered on the porch, jeering, spitting into the dirt. The stranger set his glass down. The sound was small, but the bar hushed like a breath held. His hand stayed on the rim, knuckles scarred white from battles long past. A drunk at the far table leaned back, grinning. "You new here, mister? Best get used to the sight. That one ain't clean." His voice dripped like tar. The room chuckled, brittle and mean. The stranger didn't answer. His eyes stayed on the window, where the widow's shadow slipped further down the road. His jaw tightened. A match struck. Smoke curled from a cigar. "Reckon she's cursed," another said, puffing out a cloud. "Best keep her distance if you know what's good for you." The stranger's silence cut sharper than any word. He rose slow, shoulders rolling like a man who'd carried weight too long. Coins clinked on the counter. His hat lowered over his brow. Without a glance, he pushed back through the swinging doors into the heat. The porch went quiet as he stepped down. Dust puffed beneath his boots, sunlight glinting off the iron at his hip. The men leaned back, smirks fading, uncertain now. His shadow stretched long across their boots, across their spit-stained jeers. The widow, further ahead, turned when she heard the sound of his steps. For the first time she paused. He lifted nothing but a small paper-wrapped loaf of bread from his saddlebag, held it out without a word. Her hand trembled as she took it. For a breath, the street stilled. Flies hung in air, shutters ceased their rattle. Even the wind seemed to stop. She whispered again, barely moving her lips, "I'm not pure." The stranger gave no answer. His silence weighed heavier than all their laughter, and the men on the porch found nothing left to say. The gang thundered into town, with dust boiling behind their horses, iron shoes striking sparks on stone. Guns hung loose at their sides, faces shadowed beneath wide brims. The saloon emptied in a rush of boots and curses as townsfolk scattered for doorways, shutters slamming like rifle bolts. The leader, a tall brute with a scar cleaving his jaw, reined up hard at the well. His eyes cut straight to the widow. "There she is," he barked, voice raw as gravel. "Still hiding under rags." His men roared laughter, dismounting in a clatter of spurs. One shoved through the crowd, boots crunching in the dust, and ripped the cloth from her shoulder with a vicious jerk. Gasps spilled from every throat. The cloth fluttered to the ground, torn and trampled. What it revealed stopped the jeers cold. The scar glared across her skin, a wound healed rough, born not of sin but of war. And stitched inside the lining of the cloth, half hidden, the faded patch of a field nurse. Union blue, edges frayed but unbroken. The leader spat, confusion souring to rage. "A nurse? That's all. You bled soldiers and call yourself clean?" His hand went for his gun. The widow did not flinch. Her eyes, once cast down, burned now with something fiercer than shame. The stranger stepped forward, the crowd parting like wheat in wind. His revolver cleared leather faster than breath. The first shot cracked through the heat, echoing off storefronts. The leader's hand snapped back, gun clattering into the dust. Chaos tore loose. Pistols flared, smoke thickening the street. Horses screamed, men shouted, bullets punched into walls, tearing splinters from porches. The stranger's stance was steady as a stone tower. Each squeeze of the trigger sent another outlaw reeling, boots tangling in dust. A shot struck his side. He staggered, teeth gritted, blood darkening his coat. Yet he held fast, eyes cold as iron. The widow bent, snatched a fallen rifle, her hands trembling only for an instant. Then they steadied, as though some long-buried training surged back through her veins. She sighted down the barrel and fired. One outlaw spun, collapsing into the dirt. Another fell before he could mount. The townsfolk watched wide-eyed, pressed into door frames, unable to move, unable to breathe. Gunfire faded to echoes. Smoke drifted upward in slow ribbons. Bodies lay scattered still. The widow stood tall, cloth forgotten at her feet, rifle lowered. Her face was pale, her breath ragged, but her gaze unbroken. The stranger turned toward her, bloodied but unbowed. His chest heaved, and for a moment, he forgot the ache of his wound. His heart stopped, not from pain, but from the sight of her truth laid bare. Silence fell over the street. Only the creak of a sign in the wind remained, swaying above the hushed crowd. The cloth lay crushed in the dirt, but the woman above it stood unshaken. The street lay heavy with smoke, the kind that clings to the tongue and makes silence louder than gunfire. Dust drifted over the bodies where they fell, covering boots, guns, faces. The townsfolk edged from their doorways, slow and careful, as if stepping into a church after years of absence. No one spoke. Not of the blood, not of the dead. Their eyes held only her, the widow who stood unflinching, shawl gone, scar bared in the sun. She still held the rifle, but her hands did not shake. The wind tugged her hair loose, strands catching the light like fire. Beside her, the stranger straightened, though pain bent his frame and blood soaked his side. His revolver hung heavy in his hand, barrel smoking, arms steady even in weariness. He looked not at the bodies, not at the gawking crowd, but at her. And in that look, the town saw something greater than fear, something stronger than shame. The sheriff finally rose from his bench, hat pressed to his chest. His lips moved, but no words came. The preacher's wife crossed herself. The boy who had stared wide-eyed the day before now watched with awe, clutching his mother's skirt, but leaning forward as if the scene might brand itself into his soul forever. The widow bent once, slow and sure, to drop the rifle into the dirt. The sound of wood and iron striking ground echoed sharp, final. She turned, back straight, and walked through the smoke as if the world had been hers all along. The stranger followed, silent as ever, each step leaving dark stains in the dust. He did not lean, did not falter. He walked like a man who had finally found a reason to keep walking. And the cloth, the rag they once mocked, remained crushed in the dirt, trampled beneath boots and blood. None dared lift it. None dare name her what they once had. Time carried the dust away, but the story clung tighter than smoke. They whispered it at campfires, muttered it in saloons, told it to children when the night grew too long. They said the widow wasn't fallen at all. They said her scar was proof she'd stood where others bled and broke, that her cloth carried the weight of men she'd saved when the world was on fire. And they said the stranger, quiet as stone, was no savior at all. He was only the witness who saw her as she was, and the iron beside her when the town found its courage too late. So the tale spread, from canyon to desert, from creek bed to mountain. They told of the day a woman cast off her shame and stood taller than the men who sought to break her. And when the storyteller's voice drops low, when the fire spits and shadows dance, you'll still hear it. They said she was not pure, but she was more than pure. She was true, and truth was the sharpest weapon of them all.